Get some answers. Brian Beary, Washington correspondent with EU Affairs daily newspaper Europolitics, and also author of, co-author of Separatist Movements. Let me start with this. 2 weeks ago, I couldn't imagine we'd be having this discussion. What happened?
My view is that as you get closer to referendum day, there's a certain emotional pull that having one's own country has, and I think as Scottish people have gotten closer, that's having an effect. I also think that the Scottish National Party, which is in government in Scotland, led by Alex Salmond, has had a pretty effective campaign. For example, the very simple question that how it's phrased is in a positive way. Should Scotland be an independent country, looking towards the future and independence, as opposed to emphasizing breaking with the United Kingdom? So basically, I think the yes campaign has done well, and the no campaign are starting to look a bit desperate.
And how did the yes campaign even get started? I'm specifically pointing out to the timing of this entire situation.
You're referring to how the referendum came about? Well, it was important to stress it was by consent between the Scottish government and the British government. In the last 3 or 4 years, since the Scottish National Party took control, absolute majority in the Scottish devolved government, they made it clear they wanted this referendum. They negotiated the terms of it with the British government in London.
So that's my point. The British government knew about this, but it seems like it's such a shocker to everybody. But they've known about this,
yes,
right?
Yes, they've known about it, but they were watching polls, opinion polls, for the last 2 or 3 years, which showed a very consistent victory for the no campaign by about 10 percentage points. What's happened in August is that that lead has evaporated, and suddenly you have all the political leaders from London rushing up to Scotland to try and
because the polls are now a little closer.
Because it's gotten neck and neck.
Okay, Owen brought up a couple points, so we're talking about the consequences of it. Let's talk about the money first. They obviously share the pound. So if Scotland leaves, is there a solution to what currency they're going to use?
It's a question mark. The British government is saying now that Scotland cannot stay part of their currency and be an independent. And the Scottish government is saying, why not? There's no reason why we can't. So it's really sort of a bit of a bluffing game right now.
Interesting. Somehow you're not the only one thinking that. Now, on defense, when you have your own country, you're responsible for the defense of your own country in the event of an invasion or war, perhaps. What's Scotland to do?
Scotland has always been a little bit more sort of on the left, politically speaking, in that way. It's much less sort of comfortable with things like owning nuclear weapons, etc. So probably Scotland would steer a different course on foreign policy in general, perhaps a bit more neutral, like neighbouring Ireland. And the big issue, of course, is what to do with the nuclear submarines which belong to the United Kingdom but are currently stationed in Scotland. Probably the Scottish would want to get them out of there and somewhere in England and Wales.
I imagine they wouldn't want them to be there in this particular case. Parliament, government. Having your own government is not like just buying a house or a car. I mean, it takes time. People have to go in. Does Scotland have the capacity to have their own freestanding government, maybe not right now, but at least in a short term, if this vote becomes a yes?
Absolutely. Scotland has had devolved government for 15 years now, and it's precisely because it's had a taste of that and it wants more of that, that we're at this point where the separatist Scottish National Party now has an absolute majority in the Scottish Parliament. So in a sense, it's Tony Blair's introduction of devolution in Scotland 15 years ago that has led us to this day that we're at today.
What do you think is going to happen?
I predict the yeses will keep edging forward slightly, and there'll be a narrow yes vote.
All right. Now, I mean, that's not what the majority thinks. I mean, the polls still say that the noes are slightly in favor as of at least yesterday. So if that were to be the case, what would the likely reaction be globally, you think? I mean, not just within England, but also Europe, the Americas, Asia, the entire world?
I think there's a lot of surprise. People did not see this coming, which surprises me in a sense, because the Yes campaign was always only 5 or 10% off the 50% mark. The biggest worry would be in Europe, where countries like Spain have major separatist movements from places like Catalonia, and would be very, very worried about the domino effect. So you definitely have the rest of Europe watching like a hawk what's happening in Scotland.
Yeah, very, the unintended consequences, so to speak. Brian Beary, thank you very much, Washington correspondent for the EU Daily Affairs newspaper, Europolitics. Good to see you.